This episode is brought to you by Honda. When you test drive the all-electric Prologue SUV, there's a lot that could impress you about it. There's the generous passenger space, the clean, thoughtful design, and the intuitive technology. But out of everything, what you'll really love most is that it's a Honda. Visit honda.com/EV to see offers.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for this day.
Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to this week's edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Another week, another show on the road coming to you from the R3 Symposium in Portland, Maine. This is the episode for the week of May 19th, 2025, brought to you by Bass Pro Shops, Richard Childress Racing, and Hornady. Thank you to those sponsors. Thank you for your support. This week, we got a lot to cover here, so we're going to get right to it. Public resources, public schools, Michigan House Committee hears Hunter Ed in Schools bills. We're going to hear from Bob Matthews on that. You might have saw him on the feeds there for CSF on the socials, doing the good work there in Michigan. We continue with CSF-supported bill to increase poaching penalties enacted in Tennessee. Montana bolsters public access with 2025 legislative wins for sportsmen. Bill to better inform anglers and boaters in marine waters introduced in the House. New Hampshire air gun hunting bill eligible for the governor's signature. Game trails to main streets. Federal lands can support both. CSF supporting White Lake Wetlands Conservation Area revitalization. And finally, some lighthearted fare. CSC comes together for our annual Sporting Clays competition. All that and so very much more, but we welcome in now Bob Matthews. Bob, welcome back to the show. I'm in the hotel for the first time, and you're in your office, so we should be good.
Thanks for having me, Fred. Good to join you again. And yeah, we've always had technical difficulties when we've tried to do this, so I think this is the one, man. We're gonna get it first try this time.
No doubt, no doubt. All right, so take us through it. Like I said, teased out. People saw you there in front of the State House doing good work. You're covering that. Bring us up to speed. What's going on there in Michigan?
Yeah, sure thing. So we talked about this earlier when it was introduced a few months back. Simple bill, really. It would require that the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and the Michigan Department of Education just put together a standard course that schools could adopt as an elective, counting both as a credit towards graduation and also the classroom requirement that you need to get a hunting license here in Michigan. So, learning how to hunt and really just learning about hunting can be incredibly dependent on the household that you grow up in.
Mm-hmm.
If there isn't a parent or a grandparent or a sibling to talk about hunting, talk about earning your own meal and, the role that hunters play in both habitat and wildlife management, then, it's not very likely that that kid is going to get out and get into the field and into the woods and participate. So, school is really the place that kids are meant to learn about the things that they aren't exposed to at home. And that's why this bill is so great. And it would open the door for millions of Michigan kids to learn how to provide for themselves, put food on the table, and learn how to safely handle a firearm. And it would also, teach them about conservation and conservation funding in America, right? That the folks that are out hunting deer, turkey, ducks, whatever species you pick, they're the ones that are paying for those species to thrive and all of the species that share habitat with them, right? So it's a great bill. We were happy to provide testimony last week in committee. This week it is scheduled again, hopefully for a vote, barring any unforeseen hangups. It should be for a vote and that vote should come um, by Wednesday afternoon. So very very optimistic there in Michigan. It had really really solid momentum in the Senate last year. Um, went through the Senate with only one no vote. So we're hoping this year that we can capitalize on that momentum and get it done.
So much good stuff there, Bob. And I think, what most of these programs tend to lack, and I think you and I have talked about this offline, and it's included here, is that conservation funding understanding, knowing how this all works. I mean, the other stuff is great, no doubt about it. Especially speaking here from the R3 Symposium, the annual. This is right in the wheelhouse of this week and what all these agency folks and R3 folks are talking about. But this driving home this point of how the system works and how it's funded, that's a history lesson that, quite frankly, all kids should be exposed to, not just an elective, but this is a damn good step in the right direction in getting there. And, for those kids that are signing up, they're going to get that. And that's huge, especially we can acknowledge that probably a good majority of license holders in this country don't really know that story.
Right. And Michigan is we talk so much about wildlife councils with CSF, right? And Michigan has a wildlife council, and um, it's done great work to inform the parents of these kids, right, about the great work that hunters are doing on the landscape and what they're doing for different species just by purchasing the license and by purchasing their firearm and ammunition. Um, so from the data that has been shown, you had Mark Duda on recently, right, with
Yeah.
responsive management,
Great callback.
and he
Yep.
works a lot with the Wildlife Council here in Michigan, doing studies for them, and Michigan is one of the only places where public support is not decreasing. So the parents, they understand that there's a need for hunters to be on the landscape, and they understand, I think that this from that data, that means they understand that their kids should be learning about um, conservation and how to hunt, how to put food on the table, and how to do it safely.
Yeah, you read my mind, Bob, calling back to the Duda feature podcast from last week. And then, this morning he presented a lot of that, what you just talked about and covered, and put a good plug in at the end of his presentation for wildlife councils and, the folks in the room, trying to make them understand that, it's not for all agencies. Some of the agencies want to go it alone and do their own thing, and they've been successful at it. But highlighting the success of Michigan, he put that out there. So it was great to see this all come together for sure.
Yeah, I think that this bill it's been an uphill battle. Just starting in 2023, worked on it for the last couple of years and had to do, this 2025 session, get it reintroduced. And the Sportsman's Caucus here in Michigan has been so great with pushing this legislation. We hold monthly breakfasts here in Michigan, and
That's
no
great.
matter what the purpose of the breakfast is, this hunter ed in schools legislation is always brought up, and the co-chairs are always talking about how important it is that we keep pushing forward on it. So really hopeful that this will be the year that we can get it done, and that more kids can be exposed to the great outdoors and start to learn about the great things that hunting does for everybody.
Yeah, that's great. That's great reporting, Bob. And as a CSF priority piece of legislation, this will
Yep.
be real great to see get over the line. So good luck on that. Suspect it will go as you said, and great work on all of that. So thanks for joining us and reporting.
Thanks for having me on, Fred. We escaped with no technical
Yes,
difficulties. So,
very good. Talk to you soon.
yep. Thanks, buddy.
All right, thanks again to Bob for that reporting. That is exciting, and it's as covered. It's hitting on all the right notes, and can't underscore enough the history lesson on conservation funding, American system of conservation funding, and including that in that curriculum. Again, I think that there's room to expose all the pupils to that history lesson, and I'm sure there's an appropriate place in a science curriculum. Maybe more to come on that in future episodes, but regardless, it's a good step in the right direction, and Bob's doing just amazing work, and hopefully he look forward to him reporting on that win. Let us continue on. But before we do, simple ask, as I always do, take your phone out right now. If you've not subscribed or followed on your favorite podcasting platform, please do so now. Again, as long as you're not driving, takes all of like 2 seconds. Pull that Spotify up, pull up Apple, wherever you're at, both of which you can do a 5-star rating. So if you're able to do that as well, scroll down to the end of this episode. There'll be 5 stars. Boom, hit it. You're done. Boom, hit it on Spotify. And it helps us tremendously. So we appreciate the support in that way. And thank you for it. So let's get right to the rest of the headlines here. This from Connor Barker reporting on a bill to increase poaching penalties that's been enacted. I think Connor's reported on this in the past, but let's get to it. Yes, in January, the Tennessee Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus member Representative Caleb Hemmer and Senator Paige Wally introduced House Bill 24 and Senate Bill 14, which would increase various penalties and fines related to poaching. In April, House Bill 24 and Senate Bill 14 were amended to only apply to instances if a person were to hunt, take, chase, trap, or kill any wild animal, wild bird, wild fowl, or fish upon the land of another without first obtaining permission from the landowners. The bills increased the penalty from a Class C to a Class B misdemeanor and set the fine to not exceed $500. 24 and 14 were passed by the Tennessee General Assembly on April 22nd and was signed into law by Governor Sportsman's Caucus member Governor Bill Lee on May 9th. CSF spearheaded a coalition letter of support for HB 24 and SB 14 alongside several partner organizations. Through decades of the hard work, governed by principles based in science-based wildlife management, hunters enjoy robust game populations across the country. Regulations set by Fish and Game and Wildlife agencies aim to conserve game populations and depend on ethical hunters to do their part. Unfortunately, as we all know, poachers stand in the way of hard work of these dedicated individuals and are a serious threat to the game we all love to pursue and the societal acceptance of hunting. As we say often here, poacher's gonna poach. We'll continue and then get to the opinion in the back of this. Each state Fish and Wildlife Agency works around the clock to combat poaching cases and deter unethical individuals from taking advantage of our public trust resources. Fines and penalties faced by those caught can vary drastically depending on the state. With these two bills, now law individuals caught engaging in the take of any wild animal, and all the ones we listed off are going to jump to a Class B misdemeanor with that $500 max penalty. Probably some room to wiggle on that going forward, maybe up that. This is a huge step in the right direction for Tennessee's wildlife and the continuance and protection of our time honored traditions. CSF would like to thank Representative Hemmer, Senator Wally, and the caucus for their leadership in spearheading this important issue. CSF would also like to thank Boone and Crockett Club, Safari Club International, and the Tennessee Wildlife Federation and the Tennessee Farm Bureau Federation for their strong partnership and work on the initiative. Yeah, that's great. It's a shame that we, as a responsible community, as sportsmen and women, hunters, anglers, get included in the bad apple cart, right? And the old cliche, one rotten apple spoils the bunch. That's not true because we're in two different buckets. And I think we got to do a better job of really driving home that point and separating. Poachers are not hunters. They're not even, most of the time they're doing this stuff at night. I'm not saying all of them. Someone will check me on the stats on that, but I would bet if you get with the head of your law enforcement at your state agency, probably the majority of them are going to be clandestine operations, if you will, under the cover of night. And that's not what we do as a community. We do not do that. And I dare say, if anyone makes a mistake, the ethical, responsible thing to do is self-report. And people do. People do make mistakes. Things happen, and that's what separates the sporting community from lawbreakers, from criminals, and they're assessed as such. So I just, really drive that point home. We're talking about communications and representing our community, the general public that we're always talking about, that 80%. And especially when, going back to our conversation with Mark Duda last week, acceptance is statistically on a decline 3 years in a row. Like, we got a job to do to make sure we're representing ourselves well, and that separation of our sporting community, the poachers, is an important distinction to make. So great reporting there again. And again, I think there's room to move. I know in the track in the capitals, it's highlighted this week a bill in New Hampshire, House Bill 655, I believe it is. Yes, that's correct. That bill also goes after poachers and lawbreakers and really increases fines like substantially, which is needed as a deterrence to be sure. And so many of these penalties, some of them are cheaper than a parking ticket, definitely a speeding ticket in most instances. So, what is the wildlife? What is the resource value? And then I can sit here and tell you, and I think you would agree with me, the listener, that all of these critters, all of these publicly held resources are worth far more than a speeding ticket. So let's see what the future holds and really start making these criminals pay for their criminal acts, and at the very least, never let them hunt and fish again. That's one man's opinion. That's not in the reporting, but you pick up what I'm putting down. Thanks again, Connor. Let's head over to Montana. This reporting from Marie Newmiller. Montana bolsters public access with 2025 legislative wins for sportsmen. Their 2025 legislative session delivered key victories for hunters, anglers, and trappers by enhancing the state's block management program, bolstering public access to private lands. 3 bills, all sponsored by Montana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chairs, work to address the critical issue of land access and sportsman landowner relations. Caucus co-chair Representative Josh Seckinger proposed House Bill 763, which increased funding and flexibility for Montana's block management program, encouraging more landowners to open private lands for public hunting and fishing access. Both Senate's Bill 83 and 441, sponsored by caucus co-chair Representative Delaney Loge, revised enforcement and conflict reductions to maintain the integrity of public access programs. CSF worked closely with our caucus and advisory councils during the 2025 session to protect public access to private lands. Marie highlights here that one of the biggest issues that we face today as hunters, trappers, and anglers is the lack of access to suitable land, a frustration that can lead to the decrease in participation and fewer licensed purchasers. With over 60% of Montana's land in private ownership, access programs are vital to sustaining the state's $2.5 billion outdoor recreation economy. Land access initiatives in more than 25 states, including Montana's block management program, incentivize private landowners to allow public access for hunting, fishing, and other outdoor activities, often through tax breaks, reduced liability, habitat improvement funds, and direct payments. Montana's program has long been the model for the nation, and the 2025 legislative session saw lawmakers take bold steps to enhance the effectiveness of those programs. By addressing barriers for access, these bills not only support rural economies, but also strengthen the ties between landowners and sportsmen. Extremely important. Ensuring Montana remains a premier destination for outdoor recreation. CSF celebrates this win with our Montana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and Advisory Council members. We will continue working to ensure improved quality access for sportsmen and women. Going back to some of the details here, too, talking about the 3 bills that were sponsored. Those were signed, I want to highlight this, by prior guest and Governor Sportsman Caucus Chair, Governor Gianforte. Thank you to the governor. Thank you to the legislators, our caucus members, for bringing this forward and making wins possible. And it's a great model, and I think Marie's right in calling it a good model for the rest of the country. And again, I can't help but have front of mind here topics that are being covered at the R3 symposium, and you start thinking of solutions for so much of the country that has access issues. And when you're talking about all of the R's in that, the recruiting, the retention, and the reactivating, especially the latter two, often cited is people don't have a place to go. And I think states that need to incentivize landowners should do so if they're not doing so. I think I've talked about New Hampshire's in current use laws where folks with large tracts of land, essentially, and this is a quick, terrible, short way to Cliff Notes put it, but essentially, they get a tax break, and we have some of the highest property taxes in the country. Like we're tax free as far as sales tax and other things, but New Hampshire, like we pay property taxes, and that's a huge incentive for people that are paying whatever X amount of dollar on every acre that they own. They just simply leave it open and available for outdoor recreating, hunting, and fishing. Trapping still got to get the permission slip signed, so that's not included. But the rest of it is, and they're getting a major break on their wallet. So certainly, as it gets tighter and tighter to find places to hunt, as more and more posted signs go up, more land is leased. These are great ideas, and we can look to Montana to as an example and a starting point for the conversation. Thank you, Marie. MAPOceans Act update here. MAPOceans Act introduced last week in the House will require the federal agency with the most U.S. waters under their jurisdiction, NOAA, to digitize the map public information about federal fishing and boating restrictions in marine waters and make timely updated information readily available to anglers, boaters, and the navigation industry. Implements to access comes in many forms, including confusion around regulatory boundaries on federal waters. This bipartisan bill will fix that and is one of the many priority pieces of legislation for CSF in the 119th Congress. NOAA has jurisdictional authority on our nation's marine fisheries resources from the limit of a state or territorial sea, typically 3 or 9 miles from shore, out to the 200-mile limit of exclusive economic zone. A lot of water, a lot of rules, no doubt. In addition to the 1.24 million square miles of water in marine protected areas, mostly under their authority, NOAA also manages 460 fish stocks or stock complexes through the 8 regional fishery management councils. So again, the bill seeks to make it easier to eliminate the confusion for public recreation on our nation's marine and coastal waterways through standardizing, consolidating, and publishing digital data concerning regulation on marine waters under federal management. Quote, the bipartisan MAPOceans Act will remove confusion about where we can fish and with what gear, which can often create barriers for angler participation on our coastal waters, said one Chris Horton, Senior Director of Fisheries Policy for CSF. He continues, we sincerely thank Representatives Fry and Levin for their leadership in providing more certainty and confidence for America's anglers and boaters on marine waters, end quote. MAPOceans Act will direct NOAA to digitize and make available to the public any access or recreational use restriction on marine waters under the agency's jurisdiction. These restrictions often include areas close to fishing with species-specific season closures, allowable gear or bait types of propulsion allowed, marine protected areas, and so on. From the recreational fishing perspective alone, NOAA's 8 regional fishery management councils have implemented 46 management plans covering 460 fish stocks or stock complexes that create a mosaic of fishing regulations and restrictions. These regulations are often location specific and can become cumbersome to understand and a barrier to access. The Senate version of MAPOceans, Senate 759, cleared the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation earlier this year. CSF looks forward to working with the bill sponsors in both chambers to see this legislation signed into law. Yeah, man, I get twisted on trout regulations where I live. I cannot imagine all of this and trying to suss it out, especially if you're, going way offshore and holy smokes, it's there's enough to keep up with and you just don't want to get jammed up. This is a great resource to have this stuff all spelled out literally at your fingertips and clear up a lot of unnecessary confusion and potential penalties that are also can be considered a barrier for entry if you're trying to just go fishing and you got all these complexities and you get penalized for participating by way of fines or license loss, like that's not a cool incentive. Like, if I make a mistake, let's educate on that. But in most cases, going to get a fine. Like, yeah, that de-incentivizes people for participating. So let's get that over the finish line and clear up, like Chris said, a lot of unnecessarily confusing crossover in the mosaic of regulations for sure. I like the way he puts that. All right, heading up to for me here in New Hampshire. Reported on this a number of times, and we are finally almost to the finish line with New Hampshire's air gun bill that is now eligible for the governor's signature. House Bill 211 was passed out of the Senate on April 17th and enrolled on May 6th, 2025, making the bill eligible for Governor Kelly Ayotte's signature. Along with authorizing air guns for hunting, HB 211 authorizes New Hampshire Fish and Game Executive Director the ability to bring forth special licensing and or tags for the use of air guns for taking game. This important detail ensures air gunning sportsmen and women are contributing to conservation funding just as all other methods of take currently do through the Pittman-Robertson Act, in which air guns are currently not included. The passage of HB 211 is an excellent way of creating additional opportunities for sportsmen and women afield, further strengthened through its provision of authority to develop a new conservation funding mechanism. We, CSF, worked hard and early with our partners at New Hampshire Fish and Game and our leadership in the New Hampshire Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, providing preferred language and education on air guns and the need for conservation funding participation, as well as facilitating a live fire demonstration in the summer of 2024. After the New Hampshire Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and Fish and Game commissioners took a field trip last year to see firsthand the effectiveness and ethical lethality of modern pneumatic air rifles at the 6 Hour Experience Center in Epping, New Hampshire. Attendees came away with additional knowledge and experience of the air rifle platforms. Many who were initially skeptical how they perform and their effectiveness now have a greater confidence in the technology and seem to reconsider their stance on air rifles as an ethical and effective means of take for future use in the Granite State. The conversations around the use of air rifles as a method of take has brought about another opportunity to expand opportunities for Granite Staters through the bill that will allow for use of air guns. As I said earlier, we engaged early on this for support starting last year in 2024 and then working this session in 2025 with our New Hampshire caucus and Fish and Game leadership. CSF supports the bill and it successfully advocated for adjustments in the bill, allowing the executive director of the New Hampshire Fish and Game to bring forward a license or special airgun tag to account for conservation funding that would be missed during the increased sale of air rifles. Currently, air rifles are not subject to the 11% manufacturer level excise tax through Pittman-Robertson, which funds conservation efforts that all other methods of take presently do in New Hampshire and that are subject to. CSF has worked closely in other states to expand the use of air rifles and air bows while also enhancing conservation funding, most recently in Oklahoma and Utah. In both instances, legislators included conservation airgun stamps that hunters would need to purchase before heading afield with an air gun, which provides both funding mechanism and allows air rifles to contribute to the state conservation funding as well as important data point for state fish and wildlife agencies to monitor and evaluate air gun usage through time. CSF thanks New Hampshire Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus and co-chair Representative James Spillane for his leadership in sponsoring House Bill 211. CSF looks forward to working with the New Hampshire Secretary of State and delivering this win for New Hampshire sporting community to the corner office and Governor Ayotte's signature, making 211 law. Yeah, it's a good bill. It's a priority for us, and happy to see it get to where it is. Some work, multi-year work on this. Interesting enough, if you read that language that's passed, now there will be the Fish and Game will set the limits, the regulations, the foot pounds, the muzzle velocity, all that. But I think what's cool about this technology, I mean, you're going to be able to take everything from squirrels to moose in New Hampshire with these air rifles, with the exception of a wild turkey. That was an exception, and one I agree with. It's really cool. So, I'm not sure how many people are going to be running out to purchase some of these air rifles, but those that do, it'll be interesting to hear about their experiences and how much they liked it and all of that. So, all right, this next one, game trails to main streets, federal lands can support both. Coming out of Washington, this is our press release from last week on the public lands issue. From mule deer to pronghorn on BLM lands in the west to wild turkey and trout on U.S. Forest Service lands in the east. For many of us, America's federal public lands are the bedrock of our access to our sporting traditions. For millions of individuals, it is this network of federal public lands where deep connections to fish, wildlife, and the outdoors are born and where their families forge lifetime memories. To those who rely on federal lands to hunt, fish, trap, or target shoot, particularly in the West, where more than 70% of the people rely on federal public lands to participate in our cherished pastimes, the concept of losing access to these lands is distressing. Spurring this unease among sportsmen and women are recent public statements and actions undertaken by policymakers in Washington, D.C. that seek to sell off and dispose of certain federal lands in Nevada and Utah. Rest assured, CSF is fighting to ensure that any actions related to the sale of public lands do not result in a loss of opportunity for our time-honored traditions and the fish and wildlife that call these lands home. Public lands belong to all Americans, whether you live in Maryland or Montana. You are an American taxpayer, and these lands belong to you. The deep connection we have with our fish and wildlife resources is realized in many cases through our federal public lands. Any disposal of federal lands must therefore be addressed in a thoughtful and transparent process. However, there is another side to this story, and that is that many communities, especially in the West, can be limited both spatially and financially by the networks of federal lands that surround them. As such, CSF recognizes and, in the right circumstances, supports the need to conduct small strategic federal land exchanges or sales that, in return, ultimately benefit sportsmen and women by improving access somewhere else. But the details and process matter. CSF is not anti-disposal or sale by principle, but we are pro-process and transparency. When done correctly, through an appropriate and transparent process that leverages the existing authorities and tools already in the toolbox, land disposals and exchanges can meet the need of local communities to build affordable housing, a new fire department or public school, while also ensuring that federal public lands continue to serve as a critical asset for sportsmen and women to enjoy the outdoors. But when efforts to sell or dispose of federal lands are unexpectedly added to a piece of legislation that requires a lower degree of congressional passage than normal legislation, it causes concern. In this case, a late night unexpected amendment to a budget reconciliation bill, which requires a simple majority of 51 votes in the Senate compared to the normal threshold of 60 to potentially sell off and dispose of certain federal land, is problematic. CSF is more than willing to have discussions with decision makers about how we can meet the needs of local communities while ensuring sportsmen's access is not lost in the process. However, we believe that there are a number of existing authorities we should use rather than trying to address this issue through an expedited process such as reconciliation. One of these tools is the Federal Land Policy and Management Act, which guides federal land management and also the process to dispose of federal lands. Under the Federal Land Policy Management Act, there is a very clear process of how lands can be disposed of by considering the economics and difficulty of managing certain lands' biological value, such as a key big game migration corridor, recreational value, such as supporting hunting and fishing, and to determine if the land could serve important public objectives, such as affordable housing. Importantly, the Act also requires that disposal of public lands can only occur when other options cannot feasibly be achieved and when the need, like housing, for disposal outweighs the public objectives, such as outdoor recreation. The challenge with that act is not that it is a weak federal authority. The real issue is that this process has long been underutilized. Opponents of the act process will often argue that the process is lengthy and bureaucratic. Despite our frustrations with the process that may seem bureaucratic, it is important to ask the question, why is this process in place? In the case of federal public lands, this lengthy and thorough process is in place because once a parcel of land on federal land is sold or disposed of, it is unlikely that the parcel will end up in public hands again, potentially resulting in a net loss of access for sportsmen and women, unless replaced with a parcel equal to or greater conservation and public access value. Again, CSF welcomes the opportunity to have conversations about opportunities to meet the needs of local communities while also ensuring that federal land sales or disposals are offset somewhere else to avoid reducing access to our sporting community. Notably, the FLPM Act also allows BLM to exchange public lands when the public interest is well served. For example, BLM conducted over 300 exchanges during a 10-year period from 2006 to 2015, which involved more than 150,000 acres, demonstrating that when we are measured and calculated, we can deliver land exchanges that result in a win-win for local communities and users of public land. Another existing process to address the challenges facing local communities is the Federal Lands Transaction Facilitation Act, which CSF worked hard to see reauthorized in 2019 Dingle Act. The overarching goal of the FLTF Act is essentially to sell lower value land in exchange for higher value lands. Under this act, the vast majority of the proceeds, 96%, from land sale go into an account that is then used to acquire higher value lands that improve access to existing public lands. Unfortunately, portions of the reconciliation bill seek to send the revenue of the land sales into a general treasury rather than reinvesting the proceeds to offset the potential loss of wildlife habitat and recreational value. FLTF Act helps support local needs and the goal of sportsmen and women simultaneously. For example, the Act allows for us to dispose of low value conservation and recreational lands near growing towns where these values are limited because of low wildlife populations and or safety concerns related to target shooting. In exchange, through utilizing the Act process, we can improve access to higher valued lands that truly meet the needs of sportsmen and women. Lastly, It's also important to recognize that the role that federal lands plays in local economies. In 2022, sportsmen and women spent more than $144 billion on hunting and fishing related expenditures alone, much of which supports local economies through purchases at restaurants, gas stations, and sporting goods stores. Federal public lands often serve as the primary driver to local tourism, which can fuel economic growth of many of our small towns and communities. Supporting federal public lands and local communities is not a binary choice. We can do both, provided that we do it correctly. It is a complex, nuanced issue and is not without real world consequences if conducted in a rushed, discreet manner. If we are serious in our commitment to support federal public lands and those who rely on them, such as sportsmen and women and local communities, we need to utilize the authorities we already have, which allow for careful analysis and decision making process to best conserve our fish, wildlife resources, promoting sportsmen access, and support local communities and their economics and social needs. You can go to the website, read more on that, digest that as much as you want, and follow the in article links for some of those resources and get a better understanding of the processes. Getting to the end here. CSF supports White Lake Wetlands Conservation Area revitalization. This from Mark Lance. The White Lake Wetlands Conservation Area spans over 71,000 acres and has long been considered one of the most important areas in North America for wintering waterfowl and an important destination for sportsmen and women. Over the years, the White Lake area has been without adequate funding to repair and maintain critical infrastructure such as levee repairs, water control pumps, and more, which has taken a negative toll on habitat maintenance and overall user experience. On April 3rd, CSF attended the Louisiana Department of Wildlife Fisheries Conservation Roundtable, where the Coastal Protection and Resource Authority presented on the need for significant funding to improve this area. On May 5th, CSF signed onto a coalition letter to Governor Sportsman's Caucus member Jeff Landry, advocating to increase funding for the area. On May 12th, CSF attended a meeting hosted by Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, as well as Governor Jeff Landry, where he expressed his support of the revitalization of this area, citing its significance and importance to the state waterfowling community. Ensuring access to quality outdoor experiences, such as what the White Lake Wetlands Conservation Area can provide, is critical to ensuring continuity of our time-honored traditions. Governor Landry recognizes that need. The coalition letter to the governor stated, quote, "We are grateful that you are making the area a priority for state investment. The need for restoration, enhancement, and protection of the area's natural resource are indeed great. Using state and available federal funds to address coastal erosion, water management, levee maintenance, and habitat enhancement will provide a major investment in Southwest Louisiana's efforts to provide stability to the area's diverse habitats while also equipping the agency with their staff with the resources they need to effectively manage for abundant waterfowl populations in the future," end quote. Two of the primary projects in need of funding are the Northern White Lake Shoreline Stabilization Project and the Gulf Intercoastal Waterway Shoreline Stabilization Project. These two projects would repair over 40 miles of shoreline that protect the vital freshwater marshes from flooding events that could erode them into the lake. Flooding would also affect rice fields and other private property where habitat is managed for waterfowl and other wading shore birds if the necessary repairs are not completed soon. CSF will continue to work alongside our partners, the Louisiana Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, the state agency, and the governor's office to support the revitalization of the White Lakes Wetlands Conservation Area. Wrapping it up with some lighthearted fare here. March 13th, despite some inclement weather, and it rained a lot actually. Our members of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus got together despite the rain and had a heck of a time. The event kicked off with registration and warm-ups, and soon after, the bipartisan clays competition commenced, ending in the afternoon with lunch and bragging rights ceremony. In hosting these events, CSF helps to educate elected officials about pressing sporting issues, encourages cooperation across the aisle, and celebrates the important legislative wins made on behalf of the sporting community. Quote, enjoying the great outdoors and some friendly competition certainly is not a partisan pastime. The Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation annual Congressional Clays competition allows us to set party lines aside and develop relationships with members who hold different ideals, ultimately creating a stronger legislative body which can work toward putting America first. I'm honored and grateful to serve as a co-chair of the bipartisan Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus and to have the opportunity to participate in today's competition. Our nation is rooted in a rich sporting heritage, and this competition is an excellent way to celebrate and pay homage to our country's great history, said CSC co-chair Representative Bruce Westerman. Quote, as challenges to access, conservation, and outdoor traditions continue to grow, it is critical that sportsmen and women have strong advocates in Congress, said CSC co-chair Representative Jimmy Panetta. Continuing, the annual Clays competition brings together bipartisan lawmakers and leaders to build relationships and reinforce our shared commitment to America's sporting heritage. Through events like this and the work of the Congressional Sportsmen's Caucus, we can ensure that hunting, fishing, recreational shooting, and conservation remain national priorities for future generations, end quote. And this final quote, with more than 225 bipartisan members from the House and Senate, the CSC is truly the champion of sportsmen and women on Capitol Hill, said CSF's own Director of Federal Relations, Taylor Schmitz. Taylor continues, as the largest, most effective bipartisan caucus on Capitol Hill, the CSC has been the driving force behind countless pro-sportsman policy victories. This event reminds us to celebrate these victories and to refocus on what matters, working together to protect these incredible outdoor traditions, end quote. CSF would like to express our gratitude to mission partners and sponsors who helped make the event such a success. Title sponsors included Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's, Outdoor Sportsman's Group, and Richard Childress Racing. Host sponsors included Dallas Safari Club, Dead Air Silencers, Ducks Unlimited, Gunbroker, Hornady Manufacturing, International Order of Teddy Roosevelt, National Rifle Association, National Shooting Sports Foundation, SCI, Shields, Shimano, Silencer Central, and the Kinetic Group. Co-host sponsors include Lockheed Martin, Resilient Earth, and Rosenthine Alternative Energy. Again, I invite you to go to the website, subscribe to the TSV, so you get it every week. But also here you can see who won what and what was announced during the bragging rights ceremony at the end. Yeah, it was a great day, despite the weather. Positive, happy folks all around. And I think there was a moment in time, a couple hour period, where the rain actually lightened up, if not ended altogether, so that most people could get through the courses, and then it picked up in earnest when we were all under cover. Which, if you're gonna have a crap day, that's the way to do it. So another Congressional Clays competition in the books. And we thank those who showed up to show their support and their work across party lines and have a good time. All right, that's it. The show was longer this week. We had a whole lot to report on. Thanks again to Bob for coming on and my colleagues for all of their fantastic reporting. We thank you for tuning in and listening. No feature podcast this week. I do invite you again. He's been mentioned a couple times on the program today, but do go back and check out the conversation with Mark Duda. We recap a fun turkey hunt and then get into his work with responsive management and 3+ decades of his smarts, his work, his team's work. And if you've not heard of it by name, guaranteed you've been privy to its research and data that they share and that they're commissioned to study and survey and all that. So it's fascinating stuff, and I don't think it's too wonky that most people won't get it. And especially again, if you're a legislator listening to this, it's incredibly valuable information to you and be motivators as to why we need to be more proactive in the sporting community. We'll see you next Wednesday. Next Thursday, feature episode, Joe Bartozzi, president, CEO of the National Shooting Sports Foundation. We're going to do a special coverage for a lot of their child safety month in June, gun storage week, kicking that off. So Joe sits down with me once again and we dive into that great, important, timely conversation, one that you're going to want to share with family and friends. And especially if you got kids, sit them down, listen to some of this, or take talking points from it and share it with them. And, hopefully you're able to implement some of this stuff and it's a good resource for you. So look forward to that again with NSSF's Joe Bartozzi next Thursday. Good luck to everybody that's still turkey hunting, still some time left and quality hunting to be had. So if you're traveling or if you're just in these spaces in your hometown where you can still do it, be safe, get home to your family safe. Good luck filling those tags. Like I said, we'll see you again next Wednesday for the update and the feature drop on Thursday. That's going to end this show coming to you from Portland, Maine and the R3 Summit. So much great stuff being discussed and talked about here. I invite you to also go on to the website for the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports website. And there's a whole bunch of resources, R3 resources there that you can use. And we'll leave it at that. Thanks again for tuning in to this long one. Thanks for hanging. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.